We were warned that this day was coming, and it's finally starting to spread across all of our teams and across different companies. The day that the junior engineers were only trained with AI assistants. Hi, my name's Nick Cosentino, and I'm a Principal Software Engineering Manager at Microsoft. Today, we're going to be going over to our favorite place for software engineering advice, Reddit, and reading through a post on junior developers using AI assistants. I thought this would be an interesting topic to go through because I think that there are a lot of people exploring these tools and a lot of people at different levels with different opinions on this kind of stuff. So if that sounds interesting, just a reminder to subscribe to the channel and check out that pinned comment for my courses on Dome Train. With that said, let's jump over to Reddit and read this post. Alright, so to kick things off, I'm going to read through this post. I'm going to give my high-level opinion. We'll scroll through a few comments, and then I'll add a little bit more context and my thoughts on what some other folks are saying. So the question reads, what's everyone's thoughts on juniors using AI code assistants? And the person goes on to say, we recently got a junior engineer who only codes using AI autocomplete, which makes pair programming a complete pain. The autocomplete from the AI assistant was not helpful and only got in the way while I was trying to navigate with them. And they couldn't code without it after we told them to turn it off. Like, didn't know how to write a function declaration or declare structs. I guess I want to hear if anyone else has experienced anything like this with junior devs. And it's very interesting, right? So it very much sounds like this individual is on a team, they have a junior that's come in, and it sounds like the junior is not even sure how to program in the particular language that they're using. And I think that's an interesting point because I've talked about this before. I've said that even at Microsoft, I've hired in people that don't know how to program in C#. We end up teaching these people how to program in C#, but they have experience in other programming languages. So on the surface, it's kind of interesting. I don't necessarily blame an individual if they don't know how to use the particular language. We don't have enough context from this post whether or not this junior developer has experience in the particular language. If they don't, then I really don't expect that right in the beginning they're going to understand this stuff. Certainly, if you put me into even Python and said, Nick, start coding, I'm probably going to have to go say, wait a second, how do I go declare a variable, a function, little things like that. Once I see the pattern, I go, oh yeah, I've seen this before and I'm good to go. But I probably would get stuck, and I've been programming for over 20 years. So it's one of those things I think that the muscle memory just has to come back, but we don't really know in this case with this junior developer. Very interesting. It sounds like there's a heavy reliance on using the AI coding tool. And I would expect that based on how this person's described this developer, that either it's a matter of this person just doesn't really know the programming language and or they're not really sure how to go code things from scratch. I think this is kind of fascinating because I think that for many of us that have been in industry for at least a little while, say a few years, over 10 years, some range like that, there's probably a way that we think about things like traditionally, which is like you're going to go practice coding in a particular language. You're going to go building some stuff. You're going to go get a job doing that. You're going to switch languages and build different types of things. But along the way, you're practicing all of these things. And that practice involves you writing the code. In this case, it sounds very much like this individual that they're describing, this junior developer, like I said, either doesn't know the language and or they're just relying on communicating to the AI tool to be able to write the code for them. I personally have not yet experienced this, having someone with, what seems like zero hands-on coding experience trying to build software. I have not experienced this, but I think we'll probably see more and more of this. Now, I do think that if you're going to use AI tools, I still think that it's very important that you do understand the language you're working with. I do think that if you try to use the tools and jump ahead without at least a basic understanding of what's going on, it's going to set you up for a few more challenges down the line. And what I mean by that is that LLMs are still not at a point where we can trust them 100% because a lot of the time, what they're outputting is going to be based on what we're putting into them. And if you're very new to software development, you might not know the best ways to go prompt the LLM to go do things effectively. Therefore, it's going to give you a lackluster result. And if you don't know how to go spot check that, to ask it better questions for how to improve it or question what it's doing, you're probably going to take that code, go to use it, and kind of build on top of this foundation that's maybe a little bit wobbly. And when I say a little bit, I mean a lot of it. But does that mean that this is impossible for people to start programming this way? And I think the answer is no, it's not impossible. In fact, I'm going to bring him onto the channel. A lot of folks probably don't remember him because I mentioned him right when my channel was starting to grow in the very beginning a couple of years ago. But my original video editor that got me set up, his name is Jamal, and he is actually building software heavily using LLMs. If you were to ask him, hey Jamal, do you know how to program? He would tell you, nope. And he would say that with confidence. He doesn't see himself as a programmer, but he has successfully put together entire web applications that he has been able to sell. I do think that there is this sort of new order of people coming in leveraging tools like this. However, I do think that you need to put in more effort to start gluing these pieces together. For someone like Jamal that I was just explaining, he might fit the bill that's being described here, right? If he were hired into a place and they said, okay, Jamal, let's program together, he would probably say, like, depending on the language, like, I don't really know how to do that. Let me ask the LLM. And I agree with what this poster has put here. To pair program, that would probably feel pretty frustrating because you're like, look, man, it's just a variable declaration. It's just a function declaration. Just type it. Like, don't you just know to do that? But for someone like I just described, they might not. Certainly, in these instances that are being described here, that could make it very challenging to work together. And if that's how this team works a lot of the time, yes, that might be a bit of a barrier for effective working within the team. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that person is not going to be able to put together code that works effectively. Don't get me wrong. Like I was saying earlier, I do think that it's important to understand what you're doing, the language, the tools that you're using to feed that information into the LLM. But I do think that you can use it iteratively. So maybe if you need more experience, you could be using the LLM to kind of get you that next step. But you should be going back to the LLM tools and asking it questions, challenging it, trying to understand what it's doing, and then doing more homework on top of that. So again, not just taking the LLM output, not doing any like homework on it, just kind of taking it blindly. I do think that you want to build on top of what it's giving you so that you can understand it better. That way, the next time you're going to prompt it, you can do a better job. In the context of hiring on junior developers, I'm trying to put myself in this situation. If I had someone come onto the team and I sat down with them and we were going to pair program on something, that's not really what I do in my role anymore. But if that were the case, if I saw that they were struggling like this, probably what I would try to ask them is like, number one, like, should we get clarification on their understanding of the language? Because I think that's important. If they don't have an understanding of the language, again, I don't even think that's an LLM thing because, if they didn't have LLMs, if they didn't know the syntax, they're just going to go search it online. It's just a different tool to get the syntax. I feel like that one's maybe not a great example. But I would like to ask them, hey, are you familiar with the language? And if they are, then I might say, okay, well, it seems maybe a little weird to me if they're not able to recall that syntax, but that's okay, right? I would just want to confirm with them if they need to do a little bit more homework or understanding and to get more introduced or familiar with the language. So that's kind of step one. Beyond that, because this is new to me, if someone felt they could be very effective using an LLM, I would be less concerned about them using that tool to create code. Like, from a philosophical perspective, I would be more concerned in which tools they're using and if they're taking company information and putting it somewhere else. So for example, at Microsoft, we have Copilot. We can use that internally. If someone was taking code that we had internally, putting it through Copilot internally, I would have no problem with that. So that wouldn't be an issue. But I would have an issue if someone was taking proprietary information and picking a random LLM thing that they prefer online and trying to get information out of that. So more of like a security type of concern that I would have and less about the philosophy of which tools they're using. I think for me as a manager, bringing on people that are acting like this onto the team that are heavily reliant on LLMs, this would probably be a learning opportunity for me because if they were able to go through the interview process, they did a good job doing that and we vetted them and that all worked out, either we have a gap in our interview process and we're bringing on people that we're not necessarily comfortable working with, maybe the way that we're testing for skills isn't quite the right way, or that is all good. And it's just a learning opportunity for potentially this new wave of developer that's coming through. And to give you a brief example of what I mean by that, there's probably people the generation before me as developers, and they might say, hey, it's pretty wild to me that you never programmed in some language like C, a significant amount of time, or that you really took some time to go like focus on pointers and maybe even learn some assembly and do different instructions like that. Like they might think that that's weird or sort of holding me back as a developer that I never did that. And the same thing could apply here where I'm saying, hey, if you didn't do these things that I did for learning, therefore you're not going to be a good developer. I think it's too early for us to make a claim like that. So I'm actually pretty interested in seeing how things are going to evolve. But for me, this wouldn't be a total deal breaker. I would just want to make sure I understand where this person's at. If they need a little bit more coaching, again, they are a junior developer, then we go look at how that needs to happen. If that means spending a little bit less time outside of the LLM tools to get more familiar, hands-on with the language, so be it. But I would want to work with them to try and understand the best way that we could do that. Now, let's have a little read through some of the comments here. The first one says, we hired someone unqualified who doesn't know how to do the job. So is AI bad, right? They're kind of mocking the person who's asking this because that's really what it sounds like, right? This person's taking the stance that the original poster saying, hey, this person's just unqualified. So is artificial intelligence the thing to blame? So I think the way that the OP responds to this is kind of interesting, right? Because at least through talking with this individual, right? So he's talking with this junior developer. It sounds like based on his experiences that he's talking about, that he's able to put things together successfully. So if we read a little bit further, right, like we started pair programming with them and he's like, I don't know how this person got hired. But he goes on to say, but yeah, a lot of my team were basically ops people. And no, instead of learning to code, they just use ChatGPT or AI assistant until it works. He then says it really is only him and one other person that knows how to code. So it sounds like there's already other people, if I'm interpreting this properly, there's already other people on the team that are heavily using AI assistants. So kind of interesting. I don't know, like it's interesting that he's singling out the junior developer, although it sounds like there's other people that kind of do the same thing. This person goes on to say, it's his first day. Does he know the programming language you use in your team? It's kind of what I hinted at earlier, right? So it seems like he doesn't. So again, if this person's not familiar with the syntax and you're expecting them to pair program right away in something that they just don't know how to do, they're just using a familiar tool to get that syntax. I kind of said this at the beginning. If it's not an LLM, would they be going right into Google or Bing or right directly to Stack Overflow and searching and saying like, in Go, how do I, and then getting an answer for it, right? It's certainly what I would be doing. I don't even know. Maybe for me now, I might start going to ChatGPT for like some questions like this, but I think probably historically it's been right into my search bar in my browser, just like in whatever language, how do I X? So this person goes on to say, yeah, but I mean, you also got to invest in your juniors. And this is just a true statement overall. I think that if you are bringing on juniors to the team, I know that this can feel different at different size companies because at a smaller company, it is a lot of effort to bring in someone junior because that's going to mean time to invest. And that means if you're a smaller company, it's just proportionally more effort to do that. But it is important. You are trying to bring on junior people to ramp them up. You do have to invest into them. This person goes on to say, and it actually has a ton of upvotes, if the company is truly hiring people who don't know basic syntax without AI assistance, it might be time to revisit the hiring or assessment process. Right? So they're going on to say, if this is not something that you agree with, right? If this is not what, how developers are going to be working, like, why is it that you are, grading them as such when they are going through the interview process? So kind of interesting. This person says, yep, I definitely use them to outline code now. They're such a good productivity hack. I prefer fixing code to writing new code. So I tell the AI what to do and how to structure it. So kind of interesting, right? This person's very content. They're saying 10-year full stack. They're a tech lead, but they're basically able to be way more productive just patching up some code. So kind of a unique perspective on some of this stuff. This person goes on to say most syntax is a quick Google search away, so it's seldom worth remembering. Okay, so let's scroll a little bit lower. A couple of people are going back and forth on this. So the OP is saying, like, I would say certain syntax is, but you shouldn't forget the basic stuff. But is this always, like, true? Like, what does it mean to know the basic stuff? Like, for me, I program in C# all the time. I'm probably not going to forget the basic stuff because I just do it all the time. But this person goes on to say, I do because I write in Go, TypeScript, Terraform, so much YAML. No one likes YAML. SQL, right? Bash scripts and everything in between. So they're going between so many different things that they're like, yeah, I know this language, but like, I need a refresher, right? I need something quick to remind me what the pattern is. This person, they say I disagree, but they're disagreeing with the comment above. So I Google basic syntax all the time. My last job used Perl, Python, Scala, and Go. And I was Googling like for loop syntax every time I changed gears. So truly trying to get this refresher. So there's actually a lot of people in this discussion that are saying, look, if you're just calling them out for not knowing that basic syntax, maybe that isn't the thing to go focus on. However, I do think kind of bringing this back to some of the original points here, basic syntax, maybe not a big deal, especially if they don't know the language. But I do think that if you're going to lean heavily on LLMs, one of the traps you can fall into is not trying to learn more about what it's suggesting to you. If you are a junior developer, my perspective is I would not be totally bothered by this, but I would be encouraging you, hey, when you're getting that LLM output, if you don't understand what it's doing, go find out, right? You could ask the LLM to explain in more detail what it's doing. Why did it choose to do that? Maybe ask it to give you different options, try to do a comparison. But I think if you're missing out on this part of the development, then you're missing out on building a better foundation. Now, fortunately, LLMs just will keep getting better, and who knows, maybe you can just keep riding that wave and it'll all work out great and you'll be very effective. However, I would just say that I do encourage you to go understand what it's outputting, and I do think that that will allow you to build a better foundation and ask it better questions and prompt it more effectively. I hope you found that interesting. If you're using LLMs, go have fun with it, and I think that you can build some awesome stuff. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.